I retweeted before. Social Media Brothers.
That is Rachel Weil. She works for us.
What? Really?
Yeah, she's my buddy. She will be at OSCON with that device.
NoBadMemories.com.
I tweeted it last night.
Ah, that thing is amazing. I want one so bad. I literally just retweeted it with the words "best thing on the internet today."
I helped her put it on Azure. She's great.
Really?
She's out of Austin, and she's amazing. And she does all kinds of art. With she went and took a copy of Mega Man.
Yep.
And disassembled the ROM and then changed Mega Man to a girl.
Oh, that's awesome.
It is awesome.
Oh, Rachel Simone Vale, is it, or Wheel? Weil.
Yeah, she will be at the booth at OSCON showing that device, and she will be giving a talk on it at the conference.
Now I'm kind of wishing I was going to stay a little longer.
She sends the bits. She has a.
I know, by the button presses.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Okay, I'm super impressed by that.
She's the one that did the really cool Visual Studio Code Getting Started video on Channel 9.
I haven't seen that one.
It's stunning. She helped me with my setup. I recently got a new, see my camera here?
Yes, I saw it. What's all that about?
So I wanted to be able to get better video.
For what? Just in general?
Well, I do like getting started videos and stuff.
Oh, okay.
So I got this $8 head thing.
Yeah.
And then a microphone on top.
Yeah, and a lighting array.
And then this ridiculous light.
Dang.
And the cool thing about the light is it's got like, you know, diffusers and color, and I can change it to like sunset color and everything.
So this is so you look good for your P&P on those type of things.
This is so
but like for your picture-in-picture, when you do like an introduction video type thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll have a whole thing, and it won't just make my forehead look bright like this, but.
Whoa,
yeah.
That's scary.
But you get the idea, and it's like $20, and then you blow the background, and you look like a proper YouTuber.
Wow, we could do with some of that on this show.
And I think we're pretty poorly lit as it is.
Poorly lit.
Yeah, I don't think we could get much better. Good light's not our problem, I suspect.
Oh, really? Okay. What's bandwidth?
Not being pretty, I think, is our problem.
Well, yeah, there is that.
Ugly men.
Is there a $20 thing I can buy to fix that?
We have 109 people.
That's good. Let's not keep them waiting longer.
All right, brilliant. Let's do it. Okay. It is the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. John Galloway could not join us today. But we do have Q&A working, so hopefully you can get into the Google Hangout live right now, and you can see the Q&A. You can also tweet us, or you could go to the YouTube page, which I will also go to right now, and leave comments, and we'll see those comments in real time. We have about 40 minutes for Q&A today, so that should be awesome. And there's 129 people watching us right now, so I've got the comments up here, and Twitter. Damien, how are you, sir?
I'm good. It is actually my birthday, so there's that to be glad. So no one can be mean to me in the Q&A today because it is my birthday, and I will choose to not see those questions.
Yeah? Okay, well then be nice to Damien. No mean questions. He is he's 29 for the, how many years have you been 29 for?
A lot.
A lot of years.
Many years. Coming up to double digits. I think I might have just hit it. Oh, goodness. Yes, that. So yeah, a bunch of stuff has happened since I hinted last week that this week we would have some more stuff to tell people. Then we had a disclosure snafu, as we normally do. Unfortunately, a little detail of what we were going to announce this week slipped last week. Due to how open we are now.
Yeah.
We had a GitHub issue logged by the engineering team who was starting the work to react to some of the decisions we made early last week, and just sort of left hand, not talking to the right hand, that type of stuff. And some people who are very eagle-eyed in the community saw the issue and went, "Oh, what's all this about?" And so we had to sort of fast-track our announcements and stuff, which is fine. In the end, it's all good. We ended up with the blog post on May 6th. That went out. What's that? Last Thursday? Was it Thursday in the end? Yeah. That basically, yeah, it says that we got some. The big thing obviously was the schedule. So .NET Core and ASP.NET Core RC2 runtime and libraries, and I'll talk a little bit about it in a minute, will land mid-May. So what does that mean? It's now the 10th of May. I can tell you that of the various layers that make up this large body of work that we're doing, at the very bottom we have the core CLR, and then on top of that we have the .NET Core libraries, or what we call core effects. Those are the packages that start with system dot, basically. Then on top of that we have the new .NET CLI. Okay, that's the .NET exe and the thing at the command line that you call. This is a replacement for DNX and DNU. On top of that, we have ASP.NET Core, so a bunch of ASP.NET Core libraries and some ASP.NET Core specific command line tooling. And then right on the very top of all these things is the Visual Studio experience for that whole mountain underneath it. And that's where some other sort of satellite things come in as well. So we have some partner packages like App Insights and the identity model team and Azure stuff that kind of slot in at that point too. So all of those layers, they're in that order because the bottom obviously is the foundation that everything else has to sit on top of, and so on and so forth. So you could also think of them as concentric circles. And we lock down starting from the most bottom layer, moving up, obviously. Now I spoke briefly a couple of weeks ago about the various modes that we go through as we build this type of software. As we get closer to our desired ship date, we start locking down and raising the quality bar and the subsequent bug bar, which is, hey, we're not going to fix bugs unless they meet these sort of specific levels of importance. We went through tell mode and ask mode, where ask mode was all the bugs that were going to be fixed had to go through a central, effectively board of people or a community of people to be approved. And then the next mode after that is what we call escrow, which was literally used to refer to when we would have a candidate for release. It would be printed to a gold disk, and then the disk would be held in escrow, which is a place between us and the manufacturer that would print the disk. So now you can kind of think of it as a set of gold binaries on Azure Storage somewhere that represent a candidate build. And once we get to this stage, the bug bar becomes astronomical, and we talk about bugs that are escrow resetting. And the bar for that used to be astronomical because it was like, well, if you came to the committee and said, hey, we found this issue, we want to reset escrow, the pushback would be, well, should we stop the manufacturing lines in order to fix this bug? Because at that point it was assumed that like CDs were being printed, or at least were about to be printed, right? So the bottom three layers are now in escrow, and so the CLR, the core effects libraries, and the .NET CLI, we have candidate escrow builds. Okay, so they are not moving unless the layers above them run into issues that we term bad enough that we need to reset one of the lower layers.
Is this like when you want to buy a house and then it goes into escrow, it's being held by a third party, and then you find that there's rot in the basement, and then you back out of the deal?
Correct. And so you can also think of it as when you have a house designed and built, there are certain periods during construction where you're allowed to make changes to certain parts of the house. Now, once you've laid the foundations, you can't add another room, right? So the concrete slab is in escrow, because if you want to change something, they go, well, we're going to have to tear up the slab again, right? And there's a cost associated with doing that. But you could, add different taps or faucets, or you could perhaps change the paint color like right up to the last minute, that sort of stuff. And so of those layers, the .NET CLI went into escrow yesterday. We have an escrow build for that. So the bug bar is very high. The ASP.NET libraries, so MVC, Microsoft ASP.NET Core.star, basically. We are tracking, as of this morning, it was about 5 bugs for RC2, and I think during the course of this morning, at least 2 of those got fixed. So we're kind of down to like 2 or 3 open issues that we're actively fixing. And as long as no others turn up, we will have our candidate escrow build of ASP.NET Core, hopefully by the end of today, if not early tomorrow. So now we've got 4 layers at the bottom of that pyramid. And then the very last layer on top of that is where kind of everything gets ingested, which is the actual installers, the exes, or what we call the bundles, which is if you go to the download center or you go to microsoft.com/net and you click download .NET Core, what you get downloaded there is sort of the very top of the pyramid. That's a fairly chunky unit, so that thing takes in not only everything underneath it in the pyramid, so all the stuff that's in escrow, but it takes in all the Visual Studio tooling. It takes in all the templates, okay? So because those things can't be finalized until everything underneath them is finalized. So those are generally obviously the last thing to get locked down. As of this morning, that layer was tracking, I think it was 12 to 15 issues that had been approved and were being actively worked on to be fixed, with an ETA of another day or so. And then usually, once they have a candidate final build, once it's gone through the build pipeline, we get an actual unit at the end, then there would be at least a day or two, or maybe three, of verification. So now we've got all the pieces together with their candidate pieces where the version numbers are locked and we know all the things we did fix and what we didn't fix, and it's there, it's a unit. We go through a final set of verification, and assuming that's good, then we start turning the release crank. And the release crank is like we upload all the bits to the Microsoft Download Center, which takes hours and hours and hours. We upload a bunch of packages to NuGet.org in an unlisted state so that you don't get sort of tearing where half the packages are there and the other half aren't, which is bad because you can restore one, but then it can't restore its dependencies. So you upload them inside of a staging area, and then once they're all completely there, you flip the switch to make them all visible. That takes hours because there are literally many hundreds of packages now. We have to get blog posts prepared. They have to be staged and synchronized to go out at the right time. There's documentation that's still being written and finalized and groomed and reviewed, and that has to be accepted and then staged and be ready to turn on. So there's quite a lot of stuff that goes into like making an actual release that isn't strictly quick, get this bug check, get this bug check in, and then just do another build, right? So
because while you're
we're in that stage.
Because while you're doing that, just to give a little other context, because I also work here. I've been off with a team, and we've got a surprise domain coming. We purchased the domain name. We've got.
Ooh.
You heard? Did I tell you about this?
ScottLoves.net.
ScottLoves.net.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would mind if we told them about the domain. Do you?
I don't think they would mind. It's not my call, but I don't think they would mind.
I'm going to ask Hunter.
Ask our boss live before we.
So I'm working on the acquisition page right now. So when you go to get.net, what happens? Because right now we've got a github.io, we've got microsoft.com/net, we've got other little Azure websites that download .net.
We've got get.asp.net.
Yeah, get.asp.net. I'm trying to reconcile all of those things so that so that you go to Node.js and you get Node, and you go to Ruby and you get Ruby, and you go to .NET and you get .NET. So there's one place to get that. So the thing that I've been spending the day on right now is making sure that what are the instructions for running .NET Core on Red Hat Enterprise Linux? Nobody can give you the straight answer. And do you get OpenSSL and do you have to go and build it yourself, or is it statically linked? And I got to do that for CentOS and Ubuntu and on and on and on. So I'm trying to make that acquisition page. Hunter says it's okay. So world announcement. Check this out, y'all. You can go to dot.net. .net.
I'm going there now. It went to a different website.
It's a vanity domain. So
I know
that domain, that website right now, what is currently there, I am working on the new version of that will have a lot more details, and it will be unified. So like right now, when you click .NET Core on that page, you're off onto github.io and stuff. So we're working on a whole unified experience that's going to be really, really nice getting started.
Very nice.
Yeah, man. So .net, lovely. I'm excited about it.
Cool. That's awesome. All right, so yeah, so to your point, there's a bunch of behind the scenes or not technically engineering work that has to happen as part of a large release.
You're in the kitchen. We're in the front office teaching the in the front of the room, rather, teaching the waiters how to wait, making the menus, working on the open sign. You can't just make a kitchen and make food and hope people will come. You got to build the whole restaurant.
Right, and so we are. I think the best case scenario, and this is very unlikely, so let's call it aspirational. Best case aspirational scenario is that you'll be able to get RC2 by the end of this week. Probably more realistically is going to be early next week.
Like Monday, Tuesday?
Like Monday, Tuesday. So I would very much like it to be available on Monday because David and I are going to be at OzCon teaching a workshop on .NET Core on Monday morning at 9 a.m. in Austin. And I would very much like to be able to give the workshop attendees .NET Core bits for RC2 rather than having to jump through the hoops to get like nightly builds and whatnot. So
Yeah, exactly.
So I very hope that I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to get something done by that time. So we're really close. We are super, super, super close. So getting back to the announcement, that was half of the announcement, is that the runtime would be available. And then there was the other part of the announcement is that in terms of schedule, we are splitting out the tooling such that it's not at the same sort of quality level. So the things that will be going into RC2 in that time frame I just talked about are the runtime and libraries. And so the runtime and libraries is the core CLR, the jitter and all the stuff that makes up what you consider part of the CLR. The compilers, the system.star libraries that are there with your app when it's running, and then all of the ASP.NET Core libraries that are also part of your application as well. So those we consider part of runtime. It's basically anything in your app after you've published it. Right? So anything in your bin folder, if you want to think of typical .NET isms, anything in your bin folder is effectively going to go into RC2, sorry, and then that will RTM at the end of June. Tooling, which is everything else, which includes the command line experience that we're releasing as part of RC2, which replaces DNX and DNU, etc., DNVM. The Visual Studio tools explicitly for .NET Core, the Visual Studio Code extension, the C# extension for Visual Studio Code that's built in OmniSharp. All those tools, the new tooling packages that are also part of the .NET CLI work, so we now, instead of having DNX commands, we have .NET tools. All those experiences are going to be called Preview 1 next week when it goes live, and then there'll be a subsequent Preview 2 that syncs up with the RTM of the runtime in late June. Now, why did we make the decision to split those two things? So we talked a little bit about this in the blog post. For those who haven't seen it, it's on the .NET blog. If you just search for .NET blog, it's usually the first answer that comes back. And look at the second last blog post. First of all, the quality of the runtime and the libraries has been very good for quite a while. Like we did an RC1 back in November because the quality of the libraries was already very good at that point. We have made some API changes after stepping back and doing a full review of a lot of the new patterns that we introduced. A lot of that's in ASP.NET Core rather than .NET Core. And so those won't change much after that. So the RC2 statement for runtime and libraries quite literally means these won't change. Okay, there will be an extremely high bar for APIs to change between RC2 and RTM. We want to give people confidence that they can program against these APIs, they can deploy on these APIs, and both they're of high quality and they have a very low likelihood of changing. The tooling, however, is much newer. And so with the replat and the pivot after RC1 from DNX and DNU to .NET CLI, that's one of the things that happened. A lot of that tooling is very fresh, and that has been, I think it's fair to say, a slightly more complicated endeavor than we first predicted it would be. And so we're going to put a preview on that while we continue to work on it and really sort of make sure we deliver on all the scenarios that we want to. Obviously, it still has to work. Otherwise, you can't utilize the RC2 runtime and libraries that we're shipping. So it has to work well enough that you can create projects, debug projects, reference things, deploy them, build libraries. All those things have to work. Otherwise, what's the point in releasing a go live RC2 runtime and library set? So those things will work, but there will be some rough edges. There will be some things you'll have to work around. And more importantly, things will change. We know there are going to be some changes in the tooling explicitly between now and the end of the year. And I'll talk a little bit about those as well. So I talked about the replat on the dot. Go on.
Let me ask you this, though. So we changed RC2 for tooling to Preview 1 because you just phrased it very well. Things will change.
Yes.
For RC2 of the runtime, which is a true release candidate, we're not going to see APIs changing because it's a release candidate. It is a candidate for release.
So like I just said, the RC2, an extremely high bar for APIs to be changed here. Like we would only change APIs in RC2 in direct response to very vocal customer feedback that we get, where we just stuff something up, or if we find some type of fundamental design issue that leads to a security flaw or some legacy that we would definitely not want to carry over into RTM. We will not be moving deck chairs around between RC2 and RTM. Okay, RC1 to RC2 was our opportunity to do that, given the other reset that we went through. But RC2 is us saying things aren't going to change before RTM. The tooling, as I said, there are some other changes which we can talk about now that we know that are coming on the line as a direct result of things that have taken place at Microsoft in just the last few months. And so things have come online that we just weren't aware of back in November. So when we initially made the decision to pivot from DNX to .NET Core as a CLI and a project model, that was done too late for us to affect the RC1 release. And as I said at the time, the RC1 libraries were still very good, and they are still go live. We still have support for those, and so we didn't want to hold up that release as a result of that. Since then, a couple of other things have happened. One, we bought Xamarin, and in buying Xamarin, Xamarin is now officially part of the Microsoft development story, and specifically the .NET development story, and they bring with them an entire project model and ecosystem and sort of library model that we want people to be able to use from all of .NET. So, you know, the typical scenario, I might have a Xamarin application that talks to a back-end service that I might want to write in ASP.NET Core, so I need to be able to have shared code between my ASP.NET Core application and my Xamarin mobile applications, because maybe I have shared models or validation logic, or pick your poison. With the tooling story as it is right now for Preview 1, that will not be a first-class experience, because we made some decisions when we built .NET Core and DNX before it, which were very web-centric. They were really focused. We were looking through a particular lens when we built this stack, which was more focused on that modular, modern, sort of cloud-ready workloads, as we called them. And it was less pivoted at integration with existing .NET workloads, or easy compatibility or easy porting of code from existing .NET workloads to new .NET Core workloads. So we want to correct that by acknowledging that the foundation of the .NET project model today, whether it's .NET Framework or UWP or Windows Phone or Silverlight or Xamarin or PCLs or any of those things, the foundation of those today is MS Build. Whether you like it or not, MS Build is the file or the engine that drives the project file that Visual Studio uses. And we acknowledge that there are some sort of warts in that experience today. If you take Visual Studio away and you have to work with those files directly, it's pretty obvious it wasn't really designed with that type of sort of user mode as in front of mind. So we want to make sure that we keep a bunch of the efforts and features that came along with the Project JSON model and the Xproj model, namely not needing an IDE to be able to work with your project file, and solve that in good ways, such that we can get the best of both worlds. We can get the compatibility and the sort of foundation of one .NET project model for all of the ecosystem based on MS Build, while also making that project experience much more approachable from the command line and from lightweight editors and from experiences on the Mac and Linux, as well as being a fantastic experience in Visual Studio. So to do that, we have to make a change to how we do that, and so that's what's going to happen post Preview 2, and that's why the blog post talks about integration with MS Build. That's what that's referring to. The other thing that happened was Linux and Windows Nano have ended up being, I think it's fair to say, and I'll just own up to this immediately, they've been a bigger driver for people moving their code from .NET Framework to .NET Core than I think we anticipated. I think when we came out and said that, hey, .NET Core, look at it, it's great, and it's going to run cross-platform on Linux, Mac, and Windows, and then Windows Nano, when Windows Nano is .NET Core only, not .NET Framework, that pushed a lot of people, or attracted a lot of customers and a lot of people with existing .NET code bases to look at .NET Core much earlier than we anticipated. And as a direct result of that, we have very large partners and very large customers coming and saying, great, we want to get running on Linux, or great, we want to get running on Windows Nano as soon as it comes out. What do we have to do to move this application to run on .NET Core? And then, today there's a bunch of hurdles. There's not as much API on .NET Core as there is on .NET Framework, and so we're going through an effort to address that, and you'll hear more about that in the next week or two as well. There are some blog posts coming about the very concrete things that we're looking at doing to bring more API into .NET Core. And then the other big one was the project model. It's like, well, I have 1,000 CS projects in my repo or my source control system that represent our system. How do we move those to .NET Core? And we didn't really have an answer for that. There really wasn't an answer for moving from CS Proj or MS Build over to the .NET Core CLI project model. So that was the other thing that really forced us to have a look at that and make this decision to delay the tooling while we correct those things so we can get better compatibility and much better story for customers who want to move their existing .NET assets into the new places that .NET's going to run. As you and I think, have talked about a lot, Scott, ultimately we want .NET just to be very simple and approachable. We want .NET to be .NET. We want it to work everywhere that we want .NET to work. I don't want customers to have to think an awful lot about, well, is it .NET Micro or .NET Core, or is it .NET Fridge, or is it .NET Air Conditioner, or is it .NET Standard, or is it like, I want most people just to think of, oh, it's .NET. And when they think of .NET, they think of some version level, which dictates what API they have available to them as a base core, and then everything else is just a package that they reference, and then that's their code, and it runs. I mean, Kieran, one of the guys, one of the PMs over in DevDiv, said it to me brilliantly one day, and it really changed my perspective on stuff. He said, the biggest thing that matters to a customer is their code. Everything else is just noise. Anything that gets between me walking up to my project and typing the keyboard, where what's coming out is code, is just collateral. And it's just getting in the way of me doing my job of a developer writing C# or VB or F#. And so we really are working hard to ensure that a lot of that stuff doesn't just look simple, it actually is simple. Now, we don't want to solve this with just more layers of tooling or more NuGet features or more Visual Studio features. We just want .NET to be simpler. Well, there's a .NET level blah, that .NET will run everywhere that .NET is stated to run. And so there's a lot of things that have to happen for that to happen. That was a really random derivative way of saying that. But
one question I have is there was some concern on that initial, like, oh, version numbers are changing. You made it clear that it's just the tooling stuff.
Yes.
From a NuGet perspective, is that going to cause any problems, or because those were never actually listed on public NuGet, it's not going to cause any NuGet resolution issues?
Right. So if you were one of the customers who was living on the bleeding edge and who was using RC2 nightly packages, including the tools, then yes, there will be an impact because we are effectively going back in time of those packages. Now, however, they were never published to NuGet. So as I said, you would have to have been using nightlies to be in this boat, which is a very, very small portion of our big customer base. Those were not even pre-releases. They were literally nightlies. They were builds that came out of source control. And so we felt that it was the lesser of two evils, rather than try to come up with another moniker that represented something that wasn't RC, but also something that was later than RC from a package manager's point of view, which would just be a lie, because we are purposely sort of bringing back the level of tooling from its current nightly gaze. Then yeah, you will be impacted. You'll have to basically clear your NuGet package cache if you're using.
So it's a breaking change for people who are on nightlies.
If you are on nightlies, you'll have to clear your NuGet package cache.
And how do you do that?
There's a NuGet. If you have NuGet.exe on Windows, there's a specific command to do it. And if you're on a different platform, you just have to go to the folder where NuGet creates its caches or its package location, where it restores packages to, and delete it.
All right, cool.
The easiest thing is just to completely torch it and then let it down.
We've got about 20 minutes. Do you want to go through questions?
I think so. Let me just make sure I touched on everything I wanted to touch on in the previous. So yes, in terms of the MS Build stuff, just quickly, give people a little more context or a little more a peek into what type of changes we're actually talking about. So in RC2, there'll be no change, or in Preview 1 of the tooling, the project JSON will exist just like it does today. In Preview 2, the project JSON will also very likely just exist like it does today, and we will rename your xproj file to csproj. Okay, and that will happen automatically. So the first time you invoke a .NET CLI tool, or the first time you open an xproj in Visual Studio, once you have the Preview 2 tooling installed, it'll prompt you, it'll tell you that in order to use this version of the tooling, you have to convert to a csproj, it'll do that for you. And then from that point on, when we RTM the runtime and we have Preview 2 of the tooling, we'll be back to a project JSON with a csproj next to it. What happens after that is we figure out how to move things out of project JSON and back into the csproj file. So it does literally mean that. It means that over time, we are effectively phasing out the use of the project JSON as the project file and back to the csproj as the single project file format that all the .NET tools and ecosystems and whatnot platforms understand. At this point, it's probably likely that when we finish the first phase of that, that Project.json will exist in some capacity for NuGet. So maybe it gets renamed to NuGet.json and effectively becomes the new packages.config, where it lists your dependencies and your tools, because those are NuGet concepts. But everything else in the Project.json would move into the CS project. Okay, anything to do with what's being compiled, publishing would just become an MS Build target, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We would still, we haven't decided yet whether NuGet itself would become, or MS Build would actually gain more knowledge of NuGet. That is certainly one direction we could go down, and that is yet to be talked about. But very much so, at a minimum, post RTM of the runtime, so post June, right, after we've shipped preview 2 of the tooling, you will start seeing changes if you're on nightlies. We will communicate more of this as the plans firm up, where we will move large sections of the Project.json schema. That is, we will remove them, we will delete them, and all that data will instead be codified in the CS project. Some things that will not change. You will not have to list all the files in the project. Okay, so that's one of the things about the current CS project experience in Visual Studio that we absolutely do not want to carry over. We very much like not having to list all the CS files individually in our project file, because that's one of the biggest cause of merge conflicts in CS project files.
Well, that was kind of the initial magic of Project.json.
Right.
JSON is that exact thing.
Right, so it turns out MS Build already supports that. And has for anyone who's ever hand-built a team build MS Build file will know that you can put globs in MS Build and it works. It's Visual Studio's CS Proj project system that didn't work with that concept. And so we can fix that in the next version of the tooling, which is what we're planning on doing. And we already have a project system that works that way because we built it for DNX. And so we will continue to use that, the XProj project system, the one that we have right now in the tooling, to get some of those features while we make this transition over so that the broader CS Proj sort of ecosystem will get those benefits as well. Right, so that's everything I wanted to say.
All right, let's do some Q&A. We've got about 15 minutes now.
Okay.
Will SignalR unofficially work?
Great question. I believe Fowler tried to clone it the other day and build it and had some issues. I'm not sure of the current status. I will have to get back to you on that. I can tell you that SignalR is one of the top priorities for after we've shipped RTM. And so I would imagine at some point during June, when some of the engineers here start rolling off working on 1.0 because there's no more bugs for them to fix, we will start reassigning them to look at SignalR straight off the bat. And we have a lot of stuff that we want to do there. So.
Okay. Do we have any commitment from the Azure team to how long after RC release will PaaS support it? If I understand correctly, PaaS can support it immediately because it is.
Depends which PaaS.
Well, and Taurus, the code name for the Azure website.
Azure websites or apps, whatever they're called, web apps, websites, whatever they're called now. We're working with that team right now to ensure that those bits get onto those boxes as soon as possible. So we are actively, we have threads right now. I know Fowler was meeting with David Ebo just before I kicked them out of this room to do this. They were probably talking about something like that. So whether you're using Kudu, which is the source control deployment, or the push, the web deploy from Visual Studio straight to Antares, Azure websites, I'm hoping that the lag between when we push our packages live and when it works in Azure will be counted in days rather than weeks. And if we do everything, if everything goes perfectly, then there won't be any lag at all. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's a couple of days there.
Okay. So not months.
Not months, definitely not.
And you can get it working now. I've got it working over here. You just have to poke around with web configs and stuff.
You've got RC2 working?
I believe so, on the secret landing page I'm working on.
Are you running a standalone app or a portable app?
Let me open it up and find out.
Because I know you can certainly get it to work as a standalone app. Which isn't a fantastic experience, but you can get it to work because everything's self-contained.
No, my bad. I'm using the DNX bridge thing for RC1.
Okay, that's RC1. Yep.
Right, well, I'll fix that in the next couple of days. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's all right.
Actually, we need to go and do an upgrade, a site upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, we should do that.
Right.
We should film you and I upgrading my page.
Yes. So I was so that's great, because I was actually planning on redoing the changes to Live ASP.NET and recording it as a Hangout.
Yeah.
so that it would be available so people could, rather than just looking at the commit, they could watch me go through it and ask questions and stuff. So we would just pick a site and we could do it.
Good, let's do it.
All right.
Maybe you can address this more heads-on. Project JSON is going away, sad face, +8.
Yes. So
Project.json features aren't going away, though.
correct. So that's the way to look at it. Yes, we really need to ask ourselves distill it down to the actual parts of the Project JSON experience that we liked. Like, what is it about Project JSON that we like? Yes, the file format.
I liked it. It was small. I liked it small. It didn't scroll on for a long time, and it didn't have a list of files that I wanted that I wanted in the project.
So those are good. We liked that it was somewhat.
Was in there too.
What's that?
And NuGet was in there.
NuGet was in there. I didn't have to use an IDE in order to manipulate my project because I could just hand edit the file directly. And I could do so from the command line, fairly simple as well. So those things we can absolutely keep. And those are linchpins of, as we make this migration from Project JSON back to CS Proj, we don't want to lose any of those things along the way. So that's just why we're doing this in stages. If we just carte blanche went back to CS Proj now, we would lose all those benefits, okay? Which is why we're doing this in stages. And so we will add more commands to the .NET CLI so you can work with your project file from the command line directly without you having to have an IDE. You can effectively think of the .NET CLI as another IDE. Okay? It will have commands on it that let you manipulate and analyze your project, whether it's adding references or listing references or updating things or doing a publish or configuring publish. There will be first-class commands in the .NET CLI for doing those things. Secondly, because you won't have to list all of your compilation files specifically, the file will be much, much, much smaller than it would typically be today for a CS Proj, so we satisfied that part of it as well. If you want to directly edit the file in an editor, yes, I apologize, it's going to be XML, and it will look like MS Build. So it'll be made of property groups and item groups, and then underneath those item groups and property groups, we will have references, and we can add new nodes, we can have dependencies and those type of things in there. But it will look of a similar size. It'll just be angle brackets, and it'll be, it'll translate into the MS Build object model rather than a specific DSL for .NET Core project models. However, once everyone is on MS Build, and once we are back sort of in that boat, and we're all in that boat together, we are committed to making that experience better over time. As I said, we want this to be the core project model experience for .NET across the board, and we want that project model experience to be good for .NET across the board. So if we're all in that boat together and we're all sharing in that experience collectively, then we can work together to ensure that experience gets incrementally better over time. But I think the things that we've just mentioned will already be a vast improvement over what many people today consider, or some people consider to be some of the detriment, some of the bad parts about using a CS Proj in .NET. And so we are committed to either finding alternates for those features, or improving MS Build moving forward to make some of those things better to work with. Maybe that includes... It will
not be the MS Build that you didn't like. It will be the best of MS Build and the best of Project.json.
Yeah, I mean...
the benefits are what? The benefits are suddenly .NET and people with thousands of projects, people with hundreds of projects don't have such a hassle.
I mean, the benefit is like a network effect, right? I mean, this is very, it's Betamax versus VHS in some ways. Ultimately, building a new thing and then expecting the 15-year incumbent to come across and support your new thing is not a great way to move an ecosystem forward. As opposed to building a thing that uses the incumbent thing within a large ecosystem, and then if that thing is valuable, using that to help float the experience for everyone in the ecosystem, we think is a better approach. Ultimately, we want .NET code to work with .NET code, and we want .NET projects to work with .NET projects. And today, that means an MS Build project file. And so...
So you have 11 minutes. I need you to bang through these.
They're good questions.
But you give all the history from DNA till that afternoon. So, challenging you to do yes and no questions. Will RC2 completely remove DNX?
Yes.
Will it physically remove it from your system, or should you remove it yourself?
No, it'll remove it from the experience in that if you just install
it's not part of the architecture. So it
doesn't uninstall.
Yes.
My understanding.
Okay. You uninstall it yourself.
Yeah.
But it is no longer part of the architecture. We've moved forward.
Yes, correct.
All right. Is RC2 the time to start working on production-worthy projects?
Again, that's one of those loaded questions that I can't answer. I mean, that's up to you. I mean, RC1 was RTM, was production ready and go live. People have different levels of tolerance when it comes to changes that happen before a 1.0. I will say it again, RC2, Runtime and Libraries are being considered by us as a true release candidate. We have a timeline for RTM by the end of June, and the bar will be extremely high for any fixes we make in the Runtime or Libraries between mid-May and the end of June. We would very much like people to use the RC2 so we can get feedback and find production blocking issues during the RC2 milestone so we can fix them in RTM. The fewer people use it in RC2, the fewer bugs we find.
Okay, good point. So that seems like a qualified yes, remembering that it is not released, it is release candidate.
And remembering that the tooling is still in preview, so you may hit some rough edges in the tooling, but we will do our best to help you get workarounds.
MS Build, is that open source?
Yes.
Good. I like the yes, no answers.
Oh, by the way, Xamarin is now on top of MS Build as of Evolve as well.
Right, and for people who are not paying attention, yes, if you go to .net, Xamarin's not listed there. It is listed in my version that I'm working on with Samir in staging. So relax, you'll see all of the frameworks side by side. Sometimes when pulling in libraries for RC2, we see RC3 in package names. What's up with that?
That should never happen. If you're seeing that, it's because you've got either there's a packaging bug or you have multiple feeds configured and you're using stars for references and NuGet is picking the newest version of things from different
Why would it exist? Why would it RC3 something exist?
Because the dev branch has to move forward to the next version, and we never assume that the dates that we say from an engineering point of view are correct, so we always just increment the number to the next one until we're super, super confident that we can go to RTM.
So Jim Moffat, you can text me or email me or call me or whatever, and let's figure out, you very likely have some daily build NuGet package stuff, and you are bringing in NuGet star, 1.0 star.
The most common cause of that is crossing the feeds, using a release feed and a dev feed. And
is it normal for .NET Watch to be slow? I have to wait 30 seconds until everything's recompiled, and in Visual Studio Code, I want to be able to reset, refresh the browser and see changes quickly. And he says he's waiting 30 seconds plus.
Yep, so there was a bunch of performance improvements made to that sort of edit refresh cycle in the last couple of weeks. I hope it's not going to be 30 seconds for you. The numbers that I saw last week were less than 30 seconds, but they are not as good as they were in RC1 because of the bunch of changes that we had to make. That will be one of the things that's a bit slower. But 30 seconds sounds like it's too long. So hopefully try again with the release next week, and hopefully something will be that bad for you.
Okay. Oops. Will it be safer? Will it be easier in RC2 to point IIS to your source www root and run without publishing? Going over to IIS?
So that already works because IIS Express in Visual Studio runs exactly that way. It's not published. It runs directly over top of the source, and the templates are set up to do that. That said, that's certainly not the recommended approach. There's nothing stopping you running your site like that, but if you go through the normal publish pipeline or experience, it'll publish your site first.
It's kind of like release versus debug. Like you could, but you probably shouldn't.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, basically, you'll have IIS pointed at the root of your project, which includes all your source files and everything, but that's what you do in VS.
Yeah. Okay. Since the conversion tooling from legacy.NET to .NET Core is not ready, is it possible to mix .NET and .NET Core in a single app? And if so, how would they communicate with each other? I've heard a number of people have, portals or systems, and they want to have a piece of it be .NET Core and a piece of it be .NET. Should they be in the same folder, or should they just be others? How do you share state?
So there's lots and lots and lots. It's very hard to answer generically because there's quite literally dozens of ways you can do that, and they are app specific.
Meaning it's possible.
Of course, it's possible. It's just software. Anything's possible. Now,
there you go.
Because and the reason it is, and this is my get out of jail free card. When you say the same app, now in my language, app is a system. Like it could be made up of hundreds of processes spread across lots of servers, right? So certainly within the same process, the answer is no. But within the same logical app, whether that's if that's a URL space, like so myapp.com/ everything after that, can that be made up of different things? Well, of course it can. That's how the web works, right? And in IIS, you can have that root site be mapped to an app that is .NET Framework, and then you can have a sub application that's in a vdir that maps to a .NET Core application, and then vice versa again. You can just carve that up any way you like. If you want to get them even closer together, you can actually run in IIS ASP.NET Core and .NET Framework in the physical same folder, like in the same logical IIS application, in the same app pool. You can have both a .NET Core, ASP.NET Core, and ASP.NET app run. Someone did it on Twitter, and PHP, and ASP Classic, and whatever else, because they're all just IIS modules, right? And you have to carve out spaces.
Theoretically use Redis or any kind of sharing, cross-process sharing system that you want to.
That you normally would. So some applications require sharing of state to do this, others don't. Others are happy enough just to share code. Maybe it's good enough for you that you can take the same code, compile it for .NET Framework, compile it for .NET Core, have the same code running in two places, but they don't need to share state. Like, it all depends on your application. There are many, many ways you could do that.
Okay. Random comment / question from Suchi Man. Since Microsoft hasn't been open so long, has it always been so exciting internally to use phrases like, they're going to ruin everything, and yes, they finally did it right? I don't know. We're not evil. We are just learning, but I'm not sure what to tell you. Can we deploy ASP.NET Core 1 to Azure Web Apps? The intent is yes. We're working on that now.
We're working on it very hard right now.
In addition to the Azure PaaS question, what about a Service Bus Client Library and other Azure client libraries?
So the Service Bus Client Library for .NET Core specifically is currently blocked on dependency on system.servicemodel.syndication, I think it is, or system.syndication services or something. We're actively working through sort of the first phase of that, the analysis phase of what it would take to port that to .NET Core. I don't have a firm timeline for you yet.
Okay. It doesn't seem possible to receive model data from both form or JSON body, but when I tell it works in older versions of ASP.NET.
Yep. So I ran into those. Yep. So basically, in existing MVC before Web API came along, the MVC value providers and the model binders by default, if you had a complex type as the parameter to your action method, it didn't matter if you did a JSON post, like an AJAX request to that API, or if you did an XURL form encoded post, a standard HTML form post, both would be successfully bound to that same API endpoint. And while that is, it seems on the surface to be somewhat convenient, it actually does introduce lots of problems when it comes to protecting against things like cross-site request forgery in applications. And so we made the decision to consciously not keep that kind of hybrid binding out of the box like that. So now you have to declare where you expect the body of a message or a post to come from and what the type of formatter is going to be. And that was part of the merging with MVC and Web API. And this is my understanding of it. If I misspeak, someone will come and slap me. It was a part of the merging of the MVC paradigms with the Web API paradigms. And then once we did that, it was a looking at what was resulting and going, well, is this secure by default? And what are the pitfalls here and the traps that developers might lead themselves into that could potentially be dangerous? That was one of them that fell out. And so the recommendation is that if you want to do that, have two thin action methods that then both delegate to a single body action method. You can even use the nice new C#6 Lambda expression method bodies to make that really terse, so that the actual body is in a full method, but the HTTP endpoints are declared as two separate action methods, where you can specify, one is accepting the body, the parameters from a JSON body, and the other one is accepting them from forms, and you can secure and protect those endpoints. You secure APIs have different concerns to the way that you secure endpoints for form posts. It's a very long answer to a complicated issue that we all have to deal with as web programmers. So,
are we going to fix it, or are we just going to write it up and explain?
My understanding right now is that we're not going to bring back that out of the box. It just works because it has security implications.
Because you have to be explicit about what you want to include into your work. All right, I have to go pick up the kids, so I'm going to bang through these as fast as I possibly can.
Yep.
2 minutes. Will it be possible to run this is off topic. Will it be possible to run commands in Bash on Windows from a regular Win app like we run command? You can't go to Bash on Windows and run Windows apps. You can pass in shell scripts potentially and launch Bash on Windows from a Windows process and then say, run this shell. But Rich Turner owns that on Twitter, and you can talk to him, or you can email me and I'll get you answers for that kind of stuff. RC1 projects that run on Mono, will they still run via the .NET command, or is there a different story for those? I think the story is.
I'm not sure. I have seen it working. I'm not sure if it still works right now.
So
I think if you
RC2 on Mono.
Yeah, so the idea is you've built your app, you've got a DLL, and then you mono your app. Right? In theory, it should work. I'm not sure that anyone has tried it in the last week.
Okay. We'd like to see at some point a demo of remote debugging with Windows Server with IIS.
Sure.
All right, and look who that is.
Awesome. Hi, boss.
Hang on. Hey, we're doing the community stand-up. Am I in trouble? Do I still have a job? We're good. All right, I still have a job. This is good. You're on live right now. Do you want to tell anything to the people? Hang on. You're on speakerphone.
So we have dates.
All right. There's a schedule. It's public. All right, cool. All right, I'm going to go get the kids. I'll call you in a minute. All right, I got to go.
All right.
Dramatic zoom out.
All right, and engaged.
Dramatic zoom out.
Bye, everybody.
Coming out next week with this candidate, too.